Hi, my name is Mohammed Yussuf and I'm an Under 40 CEO.
The African Renaissance. The concept that the African people and nation shall overcome the current challenges confronting the continent and achieve cultural, scientific, and economic renewal is here, with young men and women taking the lead. Some call them the new school heroes. We call them Under 40 CEOs.
Mohammed Yussuf attended Nigerian Navy Secondary School in Lagos and finished up his secondary school education at Atlantic Hall Secondary School in 1994. He would then attend the Westchester Community College in New York and then Embry-Riddle University, a top aviation school. With interests ranging from aviation to current affairs, computers, and history, Mohammed is a dedicated and dynamic individual whose passion for innovative ideas, reasoning, and analytical skills make him a stellar performer as a team member or natural leader. Mohammed Yussuf is the CEO at Harlequin Aviation.
All right, welcome to Under 40 CEOs, Mohammed.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, Mohammed, you attended the Embry-Riddle University where you bagged your degree in business administration and information management. Please tell me about those series of events, in your childhood that led to that choice of course of study.
I guess as a kid, I was always fascinated by airplanes. Ever since I was 3 years old, I was fascinated by aircraft and anything that had to do with aviation. I always wanted to be a pilot. And then as I grew older, it kind of morphed into I wanted to be an astronaut. And Embry-Riddle, it was actually still called Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University at the time. Oh. And it's actually the top-notch aviation school in the world if you want to be an aeronautical engineer, aerospace engineer, anything of the sort. So that's where I decided to go, even though I got admission to MIT, into California Institute of Technology, but I said, no, this is, where I'm going. So I started out in aerospace engineering, actually. And I did that for 2 years. But I then started the process of, trying to apply to NASA, the National Aerospace Administration. And then I found out that I wouldn't pass the physical. And that just kind of killed my dream of becoming an astronaut. Oh. And I thought to myself, well, what's the next best thing? I don't want to just be a pilot. I had gotten my pilot's license as an 18th birthday gift from my dad. But I didn't want to be a pilot. I said, I wanted to own an airline instead. And the best way to do that is to know everything about the business, not just the practical experience I got when I was an intern, but to know what actually goes on behind the scenes. How do you run an airline? And so I switched my major from aerospace engineering to aviation business management. As far as the information technology aspect of it, I didn't really have a choice in that matter, to be honest, because my dad's a computer engineer. My mom's a computer scientist.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I got my first computer at 3, and I've been around computers all my life. So it was kind of almost an instinctual thing. All the classes I took in IT were pretty much just walk-through classes for me, because I knew most of what I was being taught anyway, but I still felt like formal education is important. That was one thing my parents always instilled in me. All the knowledge in the world can be gained from studying, from reading, from learning on your own, but formal education is still important.
So talking about all the knowledge in the world, you attended Nigerian Navy School, Atlantic Hall Secondary School in Nigeria, and then of course you moved to the Westchester Community College in New York, and yet you speak Spanish.
Yes.
How come?
Because I spent 3 years living in Spain.
Oh.
Well, one, I lived in Florida. I lived my school was in Florida. While I was in school, I had an apartment in Orlando and in Tampa, and we used to spend a lot of time in Miami. And Florida is a very multicultural society. So I had a lot of friends who were Hispanic. My first roommate in college was Mexican, and we used to go to Mexico during the holidays to go spend time with his family. That was my first introduction. And then when I moved back to Nigeria in 2004, I had been here for a couple of years, and I didn't feel like I fit in. That whole returnee syndrome, where you didn't understand the way things worked in Nigeria because you were too used to, Because when I came back, I had been running my own businesses in the US already, and I came back to Nigeria because my parents felt home is always best. 2 years of trying to understand the way things work here, and I got frustrated. And I got a job offer to come and be the chief chief technology officer for a financial firm in Barcelona. So I took the job, and I went to Barcelona. I moved there with 2 weeks' notice to my family that I was moving. And I went there and I spent 3 years, and it was an amazing experience.
So besides aviation, you've been in IT, you've been in entertainment, events. Please do tell me about your interest in those other industries.
When I was in university, I was a radio station. I was my university's radio station's DJ. And then from there, I got a job DJing at a nightclub while I was in school. So throughout my university days, I was a club DJ. And when I graduated, or actually before I even graduated school, myself and another friend of mine, a Nigerian friend of mine, who also went to Atlantic Hall, and by random chance, I ran into in the cafeteria at my university one day, and we've been best friends for 20 years since then. He was also quite heavily interested in music, and with all the contacts I made from the nightclub scene, we said, well, let's set up an entertainment company and see what we can do. So we created an entertainment company, two actually. The first one was called Sirens Entertainment, which was a management company, and we started out actually managing models. It's Florida, so but then we also set up another one called C&D Entertainment, which was an event management company, and we put on concerts. We did a whole bunch of concerts all over Florida: Orlando, Tampa, Miami. We did some names: LL Cool J, the Fugees, Wyclef, all of that. And then I started working A&R for a record company out of Atlanta.
All right, so back to aviation.
Yes.
You spent 2 years working on the Lorry Aviation College project.
Yes.
Please tell me about this.
It was actually more than 2 years. The idea, it came up a few years earlier than that. I had the opportunity to meet with His Excellency Governor Bukola Saraki a couple of years before that, because my father's from Ilorin, obviously, and they knew each other. And one of the times I was home from the U.S. after college, he asked me what I was doing, and he then asked me, what would I do if I came back to Nigeria, or what would I like to do? And I said, well, honestly, I'd like to build a flight training institution in Nigeria. And I thought it was an interesting idea, and he asked me a few questions, and that was about it. And then a couple years later, my father calls me and says he just got a call from the governor, and was asking about that idea I mentioned that night that we met, that do I still think it's doable? I said, well, yeah, I still think it's doable. He said, well, can you come fly back home for a meeting? So I did. And I met with the governor, and he said, what would it take to build an aviation school in Ilorin? I said, well, sir, I can't answer that. I would need to study it. So he gave me a year. He said, take a year, do all the analysis, write me a business plan, write me an implementation plan, and come back and see me and let me know whether it's possible. So I spent a year traveling. I went to schools, different aviation schools. I went back to, I had a lot of experience from the schools I had gone to in the US, from attending pilot school myself. I went to Europe, I went to South Africa, I went to Asia. So at the end of the year, I submitted to him a 150-page implementation, financial study and implementation plan, which showed that it was a viable project. And then I left the country. I went to Barcelona. And then I'm in Barcelona when I get a call from him saying, I want you to come and build the International Aviation College for me in Ilorin. And so we did everything except the physical construction of the building. So every step of that project, everything from designing the curriculum to hiring the staff to training the pilots who became the instructors, because we did an open call, we put out an ad in the paper and hired university graduates, went through 800 applicants to select 12.
Wow.
And eventually sent 8 of them down to South Africa to get trained as the first group of flight instructors for the school. We hired a former American airline pilot as the first director of the school. We assembled the entire management team, the whole thing. We bought the simulators, even the aircraft, the training aircraft. I personally went around Europe selecting the aircraft until we selected the ones that we imported from the UK. Everything about that project, it was an all-consuming 2 years of my life.
Wow, so 2013.
Yeah.
Enter drones. Now, I mean, for us in the media space, we're used to, using drones to take aerial shots, whether still shots, video shots, but you were using them differently. Tell me how.
When I brought my first drone to Nigeria in 2013, I immediately saw the advantages that it could bring into so many different things. We started out actually in the media industry. We were doing aerial photography, we did events, we did weddings, we did dozens of weddings. I hired a lot of people. Again, I did the same thing I did with, I put out an ad. I'm looking for people, I'm going to train them as drone pilots, because I had already learned how to fly drones. So I got hundreds of applicants, screened them, selected a bunch, and then I personally trained them myself. And then I set up essentially almost like a drone department within my company, because we're doing what we call legacy aviation consulting at the time, which was working with airlines and things like that. But we started out with media. So we did, we used to record commercials. We did a commercial for La Campagne Tropicana Resort that aired on CNN. We did so many weddings and major events. We did the very first Lagos Marathon. We covered that. The Lagos Polo Tournament, the beach polo competition. We did a lot of sporting events. But when we started, we even did political rallies as well too. 2014, 2015 political season. When we started, we were the only ones doing it. So, any event we were, it was quite a spectacle. It was a sensation. Wow. But within a year, we noticed that we went from being the only ones with a drone covering an event to being one of maybe 10, 15 people flying drones. In any case, that was never my goal. My goal had always been, how do I take emerging technology to address issues we have in Nigeria? And back in 2007, I had come up with I'd registered a company called ASL, Aero Surveillance Limited.
Okay.
And this was right when the whole Niger Delta thing was a major issue. And the idea behind Aero Surveillance Limited was using aviation to solve the issue of protecting the nation's resources. And back then, the idea we had in mind was using blimps, airships, that were carrying cameras that could be stationed permanently to, provide surveillance over any national infrastructure, like our oil fields or pipelines. But at the time, the idea didn't get any traction because the technology just seemed too left field. I spent a lot of time talking to people about it, politicians, NNPC, this and that. Nobody bought the idea, so I kind of let it drop. So when the drones came in, it was another opportunity to revisit that whole thing. So using the media was just an entry point, and to get to learn everything I could, because that's how I function with anything I do. Is I learn as much as I can by actually doing it. So I learned everything I could about operating drones, managing drones, running a drone company, running drone personnel, because of my ultimate goal, which was to get into security.
Okay.
And that's where we've now drifted into. My company now provides drone services for security and surveillance, for private entities, private organizations, for some state governments. In addition to that, we've also now moved into commercial activities like doing geomapping, surveying for whatever it is, whether it is an oil company that wants to survey a new prospective field, it is a company that's looking for mining, mining opportunities. We were also into inspection. So there's a lot of things that used to be done manually that drone technology has now made a lot easier and cheaper to do.
From an early age, Mohammed has exhibited an entrepreneurial spirit and has demonstrated this by starting a number of companies all over the world. Some of these have gone on to achieve the success that exceeded his simple expectations when starting them. However, Harlequin Aviation is the one that he has stayed with for well over a decade.
You're the CEO of Harlequin Aviation and have been for since 2004, actually.
Yes.
So what problems was Harlequin Aviation set up to solve originally?
Originally, when I came back, I saw a lot of problems with the industry. I saw a lot of problems with the way airlines were operating. And I felt like they could benefit from I guess maybe there was a little bit of the arrogance of youth there, but I felt like they could benefit from all the new things that I had learned from getting my aviation business degree. And that was what I set the company up to do. And then I started thinking about ways in which, we can apply technology to solve some of these problems. So things like e-ticketing, was one of the things that we got into very early, which we partnered with a couple of airlines to introduce. The flight information display system at the airport, where you can see your flights, you can see departure times, all of that. That was another thing that we also pioneered in Nigeria. So it was about finding different problems or issues and then figuring out ways to use new technology and new knowledge that the rest of the world was using, which we hadn't adopted in Nigeria, to address those issues and hopefully make things easier and safer for the Nigerian flying public.
Okay, cool. So tell me real quick, what's your company's structure?
Well,
the corporate structure. Yeah.
Our corporate structure right now is, we've just, as we were discussing earlier, we've just restructured the company. We've brought in a new board of directors made up of younger persons who I think, more like myself, we've brought in some people that I felt would be more familiar with modern technology. So we've got a board of directors, a 7-man board of directors, chaired by Dr. Tunde Yussuf, who also is my father. And then below that, you've got myself as CEO, and then we've got 8 different departments within the company, from operations to flying to safety to drone operations.
Okay. So as a family man, would you say that work-life balance is achievable or it's a myth?
Honestly, I think it's a myth. You are always going to have to sacrifice one for the other at times. What is achievable is knowing when to sacrifice which. Finding a balance is difficult. It's making a decision to know when to prioritize one over the other. I think that's the more achievable thing, and that's what I try and do. I spend a lot of time traveling, but I also try and make as much time as possible for my family.
So tell me, how do you typically unwind?
For me, unwinding is spending time with my baby girl. That for me is the most, she's a handful, but it's the most relaxing thing I can do now. Before that, I loved travel, whether it's for business or pleasure. That was always my thing, was traveling.
Okay, back to business. You mentioned earlier you learned a lot from working on the Ilorin Aviation project, how to do business in Nigeria.
Yeah.
People talk about this, country being a very difficult place to do business. And what are those key challenges that you've had to overcome to make the strides you've made so far?
One is infrastructure. A lot of things that you take for granted when you work in the first world is not available here. So you're setting up your business here. The things you take for granted, that you have power, you'll have water, you'll have security. Those are not things that you can take for granted in Nigeria. Those are things that you have to make allowance for in whatever project you're doing. So of course, those are additional costs. Second is the human element, labor. Nigeria has a huge labor force, but unfortunately, it's split. You've got a highly unskilled labor force, and then the skilled labor force, to a significant degree, you're faced with the challenges of corruption and apathy, which is people expect to get paid without necessarily giving you the best of their efforts, but they still expect their salaries at the end of the month.
So how has travel and interacting with different cultures impacted your person?
Well, one of the many things I'm grateful to my parents for was the insistence that I go study abroad. Even though yes, I wanted to, but the insistence that I needed to go study abroad, and they were agreeable to me going to such a diverse location like the United States, and then of course choosing to go to a state like Florida. I got to mix with so many different types of people. My first roommate was a Mexican, and I had friends that were Swedish, and I had friends that were Russians, and I had friends and I learned a lot about different cultures that I had never when I was here in Nigeria, we took vacations all the time. From when I was a kid, my dad, every summer, we would go to a different country. And it helps me tolerate people a lot more, because in different countries, the way people act is different. So in order to, you have to respect their culture. And the ability to respect somebody whose culture is totally alien from yours makes it easier for you to accept different behaviors from people that are more similar to you.
So how would you describe your leadership style?
My leadership style is I tell my people what I want, and then I believe in them that they can achieve it. And the reason I'm able to do that is because, as I said before, I profile my people before I hire them. So I know everybody's capabilities. I know what you're good at. I know what you're going to fail at. And I know how much responsibility I can lay on your shoulders. So that way, when we're working on something, I assemble a team where I know everybody's strengths and weaknesses, and I put somebody in charge, and then I let them do their thing. I don't micromanage.
So tell me about your failures as a leader.
None of them have failed for different reasons. Some have failed because the idea was ahead of its time. Some have failed because I just couldn't make them work. Some have failed because of personality issues. I think for me, it's usually difficult to be critical of yourself, right? But for me, one thing I do know is that I absolutely abhor failing at something that I've set myself to. So if I dedicate myself to something, I have to get it to succeed. And if it fails, I take that very personally. And because I pride myself on surrounding myself with what I believe are the best people for the job, if a project fails, I can be a bit harsh on the people that were with me on it. Now, when the initial sting of the failure has passed, and I'm able to rationally or objectively look at it, I can see that, look, these guys weren't at fault. It wasn't their fault. I failed as the leader because maybe I didn't think this through, or maybe this wasn't the right time, or any of that.
Okay, so tell me, what values are important to you and your firm?
As I said, trust is very important because of the belief that our clients have in us. If our clients don't trust us, we won't get further business. A lot of our business has been referral. We do a good job for one person, they're going to tell other people about us. IAC was a huge business generator for us, because it's something that we could always point to, and it's something that we could always say, look, we did that, and wow, if they could do that for them, what can they do for me? So that's one. Two, expertise. You need to believe when you come to me with your problem, and I say, okay, I have a solution for you. The solution I provide to you must solve your problem. If it doesn't solve your problem, you're not going to give me your business. Or if you do give me your business, but my solution doesn't solve your problem, you're not going to refer me to somebody else. So I have to make sure that if I'm going to take on your problem and provide a solution, I must know everything possible. I must be an expert at providing that to you. So expertise is extremely important. And then, of course, at the end of the day, it's all about providing value to our customers. So those are the foundations of my company.
From an intern who got an admission to MIT to receiving his pilot's license at the age of 18, Mohammed has lived his dream thus far. However, what does he do with his downtime, and what are his lifestyle choices? I seek to find out.
All right, so I have a few quick-fire questions for you. What do you love to eat?
Spanish food, funny enough.
How would you describe your fashion style?
Variable. At the moment, I'm going through a native phase.
Okay.
Yes.
So what brands do you love to wear?
I prefer to have my clothes tailor-made.
Okay. So what other CEOs do you currently look up to?
Elon Musk is probably my biggest inspiration. Elon Musk, Richard Branson, the late Steve Jobs, some of the men that I admire the most. The late Stephen Hawking, who passed away a few days ago. As far as Nigerian CEOs, Aliko Dangote, I think is an impressive example of a businessman who went from nothing to what he is today, you know. But my biggest inspiration has always been my father.
So what car do you love to drive?
My present car, my Hassie one, as everybody else calls it, the Hyundai Equus, is my favorite car at the moment.
All right. What's your favorite travel destination?
Dubai.
Your favorite book of all time?
A Brief History of Time. That is tied with the 48 Laws of Power.
Ah. And what book are you reading right now?
I'm reading a book called The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari.
All right. So lastly, I'd like to know, Mohammed,
Yes.
what makes you happy?
The true fact is, I'm a family person. You know, my family is the most important thing to me in the world. Not just my wife and kid, but also my immediate family, my father, my mother, my brother. That's the most important thing in the world to me, is family. Outside of family, it's just finding new things to do with myself, new adventures, new experiences. You know, I mean, I've done so many things, skydiving and all, you know, scuba diving, all types of things, just for the experience of it. But truly, it is really all about family with me.
All right.
Once my family's happy, then I have time to focus on other things.
All right. Thank you for coming on Under 40 CEOs, Mohammed.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Hi, my name is Mohammed Yussuf, and you too can be an under 40 CEO.